You got one mic. What's everybody? Yeah, with your chairs down front. Thank you. Okay. All right. Good evening. I declare that a quorum of at least 50 registered voters is present, and I call this meeting to order. I invite those of you who wish to do so to please stand and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag. Please be seated. Good evening. My name is Roger Grinnell. I am the town moderator. This is a special town meeting. Thank you. This is a special town meeting being held on Thursday, June 27, 2024. Let me explain the rules I will follow to conduct the meeting. First, no one may speak unless I have called upon them. Voice of God. If you do wish to speak, please raise your hand and wait until I call on you, and then come forward to either this microphone or hopefully we'll have a second one by the time we get. No. Okay, this is the microphone. Once you get here, please identify yourself by name and tell us where you live. Ordinarily, I will not allow someone to speak more than once on an issue, especially in view of how many folks we have here tonight. And I may place limits on how long any one person may speak on a topic. If there are any times when any of you wish to address a question to another speaker or to one of our officials, you must do so through me, and I then will call on the appropriate person to respond. I will allow persons who are not registered voters to speak, but please remember that only registered voters may make motions, second motions, or most importantly, vote. Please don't be afraid to ask questions if you don't understand something. Please speak your mind freely, but remember that we can disagree without being disagreeable. Please listen respectfully when other people are speaking. Please turn off your cell phones or put them on silent unless you are a first responder. I invite anyone who intends to make a motion or to speak concerning one of the articles to please come up here on the stage so we can all hear you clearly using this microphone. When we vote, I will call for the yeas and nays. If the result is obvious, I will announce the result of the vote based on my observation of what I hear. If the vote is close, I will ask you to hold up the voter card you were given when you registered. Again, if the result is obvious, I will announce the result based on what I see. If the vote appears to me to be close to call, I will ask the tellers to count the vote. This is the special town meeting for the town of Paxton for June 27, 2024. The return of the warrant for the special town meeting shows that it has been properly posted. As the first item of business, I request that the town meeting adopt a rule of the special town meeting to provide that any motion requiring a 2/3 favorable vote by statute or otherwise shall be determined and declared by the moderator, and account shall not be taken unless requested by the town moderator or requested by 7 or more citizens. All those in favor of adopting this rule, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed say no. I declare the rule has been adopted, and the town clerk shall maintain a record of this action concerning this meeting. We will begin with Article 1, which is an article to rescind the vote on Article 17 of the annual town meeting of May 6, 2024. Is there a motion under Article 1?
I move that the town vote to rescind the vote under Article 17 FY25 override contingent at the May 6, 2024 annual town meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second? The recommendation of the select board is for approval. The recommendation of the finance committee is for approval. Thank you. Is there any discussion? Okay, this vote requires a simple majority. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed say no. I declare this motion is passed. Article 2 concerns a budget which was contingent on the override vote passing. That vote did not pass, and therefore Article 2 is moot and we will not take it up. Articles 3 and 4 dealt with transferring some funds to certain accounts, and even though the articles are not worded that way, I understand that they were contingent on the override. So unless someone wants to make a motion, we will let the record show that no action was taken on Articles 3 and 4 at this meeting. That brings us to Article 5, which is for the budget not contingent on the override. Is there a motion under Article 5?
I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $6,479,375, excuse me, to further appropriate and from the ambulance receipts reserved for appropriations account the sum of $400,000, and to further appropriate from available free cash the sum of $509,481 for a total appropriation of $7,389,216, and that those sums be expended to defray the necessary and unusual expenses of the several departments of the town for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2024, and especially for any and all items shown in the budget attached in the warrant for Article 5.
Thank you, Mr. Love. Is there a second to that motion? Okay, motion's been made and seconded. The recommendation of the select board is for approval, and the recommendation of the finance committee is for approval. Any discussion? Yes, ma'am, please come up here. This is the only microphone.
Jen DeCenzo, 42 West. I have a couple of questions on the line items on the budget. I don't know who I'm supposed to be asking. Sure, so I have specific questions on account 1215, 1192, 1171, and 1132. Oh, wait.
You do that one at a time.
Yeah, do I go top down or bottom up?
It doesn't matter.
1132, 1171, 1192, and 1215.
You want to tell us what your questions are?
Sure, so let's start with 1132. So on the reserve fund account 1132, I noticed that fiscal year 23 was an actual usage of $25,299. And then in fiscal year 24, it was approved with a budget of $40,000. I'm just curious where our money stands now and why without the override, it's at 50,000. It just seems to continue to go up.
All right, so we'll take the questions one at a time. Who can deal with that question?
Mr. Love wants to do it, or else?
Mr. Love? All right. This is Mark Love, the chairman of our finance committee.
The reserve fund is one of those isolated funds that the finance committee controls, and its use can only be for extraordinary and unusual emergent transactions. In 2002, and again in 2020, that particular budget was funded at $50,000. The reason that we increased it from $40,000 to $50,000 this year is because it's an unusually tight budget, and we're suspecting that there's going to be unusual demand on that particular budget, and we wanted to have enough in order to respond to those demands. Thought that $40,000 might be a little tight, and therefore a recommendation was to increase it to $50,000.
Next question.
I have a follow-up question on that.
Okay.
Sorry. So in fiscal 23, it was 40, but in fiscal year in fiscal year 24, it was 40, but in fiscal year 23, it was 25,299. Was that money actually all used for the 40,000, or was there leftover?
Well, if you can see from the very schedule that you're looking at, the $25,299 was the actual amount spent. in a year that $40,000 was budgeted. We don't know what the amount that's going to be asked for or spent in this particular year. But again, because it being such a tight budget, we're assuming that there will be a lot of asks of us, and therefore we wanted to have sufficient funds in order to respond to those asks.
Next question.
Sure, so the Conservation Commission account 1171. It's a similar question. In fiscal year 23, it was an actual usage of 1717, and fiscal year 24, 8332. So I'm just curious where the gap is.
Okay, I'll call on Ms. Monroe, who is our town administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So the Conservation Commission account, I believe, in FY 23 did not have the funding for a conservation agent. We have a 4-hour-a-week conservation agent. So you see that number show up in FY 24, and then it stays in FY 25. That number wasn't considered when we were looking at the reductions, because it's only 4 hours a week right now to help the Conservation Commission provide services to all of you and follow up on applications.
Next question.
They're all the same questions. So account 1192 for the public building maintenance, it went from 14,744 in 23 up to 79,370 in 24.
So I believe on this sheet, the downside is you don't see a prior account that existed in 23 that you no longer see in 24. So we had let's see, public building maintenance used to be town hall and COA with supplies, and then it used to be public safety building. Last year, going into this current fiscal that we're in, FY 24, we merged the two together.
Next question.
The last one, the regional dispatch account 1215, it was 6,500, and then it was 76,550, a difference of about $70,000.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So the regional dispatch, a number of years ago, we regionalized dispatch. When we did so, the first couple of years, there was no cost to the town. And then we just had to essentially start paying for the cost of the fiber contract we have with the company in case something goes awry. Over the years, what happens is they start changing or reducing the amount of state 911 grant funding that the town gets. It used to be 100%, then it switches to 50%. And then, it goes 100%, then funds us at 75, and then 50, and now we're at where we are. Next year, it's 100% of that cost. So you're going to see that number go up again next year. It's a contracted for number, right? It's part of being part of the regional dispatch. And many conversations with state 911 over the past year, they're not in favor of towns going back to their own dispatch, and they do understand that those costs go up for an individual town over the period of the time that the grant wears off. So we're almost at what we'll anticipate paying on a regular basis with a slight increase annually once we get to FY 26's budget.
I just want to add that one note. So in Article 5, just so everybody's clear, it went up to 105,625.
Thank you very much. Anybody else have a question? Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah, probably.
Michael Benoit, 18 Lincoln Circle. I move to amend the motion, Article 5 as follows. The town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $6,479,735, and to further appropriate from the ambulance receipts reserved for appropriations account the sum of $500,000, and to further appropriate from the available free cash the sum of $509,481, for a total appropriation of $7,489,216. $7,489,216. and that these sums be expended to defray the necessary and usual expenses of the several departments of the town for the fiscal year beginning on July 1st, 2024. And especially for any and all items shown in the budget attached to the warrant for Article 5, with the following amendments. Increase line 1220 to $1,140,429. Did I say that wrong? Increase line 1220 fire department to $1,140,429. I'm reading my numbers wrong. I'm sorry.
I think it's a four. It's a four.
That is four? Okay. $1,140,429 and decrease line 1910 employee benefits to $834,627.
Is there a second to that motion? Okay, motion's been made and seconded. In this case, because we have a motion on the floor, I am not going to consult the select board or the finance committee for their recommendation. So the floor is now open for discussion on this amendment. We're talking about the amendment, not the main budget yet. Vote yet, just the amendment.
Roger, can you clarify that last reduction from the line of employee benefits?
The last number, the employee benefits line 1910 will be reduced to 834,627. 834,627. Okay. Okay. Any discussion on the floor? Sorry. Yes. Please come up right here. Tell us your name, where you live, and then go ahead.
Right, Justin Newton, 46 Davis Hill Road. Can someone just explain what added services we would be able to gain from the fire department with the additional funds for that? What would be lost by reducing the amount in employee benefits? And then what is the impact of the additional money from, was it from ambulance receipts or from free cash? What is the impact of that additional $100,000 coming from that funding source? So 3 questions.
Thank you for that. Step aside. Chief. This is Chief Pinjatori, folks, our fire chief.
Good evening. So to answer your questions, Justin, the $100,000 is coming from the ambulance receipts. That's raised by ambulance transports that will provide or keep the 2 career members that were going to be laid off, thus hopefully continuing the ambulance revenue coming in. The takeaway from the town employee benefits was the unemployment benefits that we were going to have to pay. So that will go back into their salaries. So we had to pay 29% on top of the unemployment insurance. So that would ensure that the primary ambulance is staffed 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
Any other questions or comments? Way in the back.
Sarah Ford, Richard Zaff. What else is the ambulance receipts used for? So if we say, yes, we're gonna put this on the fire department, what else might we lose out on?
So every year we appropriate, as you see in Article 1, this year we appropriate 400,000. We're now going to appropriate 500,000 in ambulance receipts. Those are used to offset the paramedics, the 4 paramedics' salaries. When the ambulance service was taken over by Paxton Fire Department some 12 years ago, we were paying as a town for basic level life support and transport, but we were contracting for the ALS. So getting that revenue allowed us to pay and continue that great service. So the 400,000 or 500,000 now will continue to go to the salaries of those individuals. It also, if you remember from the Maytown meeting, we were able to purchase a cardiac monitor and a Lucas CPR chest compression device with 61,000. So we actually are spending $561,000 this year out of that. Our usual revenue that we generate with the ambulance is somewhere the last couple of years between 460 and 480,000. So we had some money left over to roll over. It's a rainy day, it's pouring. I would have liked to have used it to replace the ambulance that is now 11 years old. At some point, it should have been replaced at 10, but we're trying to keep that thing on the road for another 5 years or so. And that's how that money was meant to be used to offset the cost of ALS and better the EMS service every year that we need.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir. Come right up, please.
Casey, one Network Road. Just a question for the chief. Do the receipts offset entirely the salary and benefits of the 4 EMS employees? They do. So we break even with that?
So with the fire department, what we do is we provide both services. So all the employees provide EMS and fire. So that's why the budget's combined, fire and EMS. Those 4 paramedics that we are paying, it completely offsets their salaries. Now we're going to use 100,000 to offset 2 BLS employees that were potentially losing their jobs.
Follow up? Yeah, just a question. I'm familiar with the town of Millbury. I've been here for 19 years. My wife's family been here for 65 years. But the town of Millbury contracts out their EMS, and all the town provides to them EMS is a spot for their ambulance in the fire department, and they provide 24/7 service with no cost to the town. And I understand they don't get any receipts from these, but there is no cost to the town other than providing ambulance space at the fire department, and they don't pay for the ambulance or anything else. There is no cost. So I was just wondering how that compares to how we're operating things here. Thanks.
So in 2007, we Paxton Fire Department officially took over EMS services fully from private contractors. For years, beginning, and I'm not a great historian, so I may have to call on my deputy chief or a retired member. But in the 70s, we started contracting with private EMS. The ambulances were coming from the city. They weren't stationed in Paxton. At that point in time, and in 2007, the reason was there weren't enough calls for private EMS to make money. They have to make all this revenue to pay their people. So they come from the city. Private EMS makes their money off non-emergent interfacility transfers. So as like the town of Millbury has several healthcare facilities, nursing homes, rehabs, where their private EMS also contracts with those to do non-emergent transfers. So they're getting money off the non-emergent transfers and the 911 transfers. As far as what was called the zero bid, when we used to have them, we were paying $10,000 a year just to get an ambulance up from the city. Average wait times, and why we took it over in 2007, the average wait time for an ambulance in the town of Paxton was somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes. Because the ambulances were coming from UMass, some were coming from Millbury. And if you know now with the traffic, it takes a while to come from UMass to get to Paxton. So we were able to take it over, and why we took it over was twofold. We had a lack in call numbers, call volunteer firefighters. So we were really hurting during the day. We still have that issue. So with EMS provides for the town of Paxton is not just EMS coverage and revenue, it also provides fire suppression because all our members are cross-trained, both fire and EMS. So if they're not running EMS calls, they're on the fire truck and vice versa. They carry gear, air packs, and tools on the ambulance. So God forbid they're out of town when something comes in, they're coming back in is essentially a rescue company. So you're getting your money's worth. And what this money does, just to kind of give you a perspective, this year, we're hopefully, after this motion, we're going to be funding the fire department with 1.1 million. Last year it was 1.2 million to 1.2 million 21,000. When we add the ambulance revenue to that, your tax liability drops by that much for the fire department. So you're not actually paying the 1.1 million. this year, you're gonna pay $600,000. In rough math, 1,600 households, you're paying about $450 a household for fire protection and EMS. And just to kind of give you a little more fact on that, out of the 846 EMS calls we've done so far this year, we've only had to give 8 of those to mutual aid, which is unheard of. We have 2 ambulances, one staffed 24/7, the other staffed by call members or full-time people that come back after hours. If we gave away those second calls, which would have totaled up to about 39, we'd probably be losing somewhere in the vicinity of about $40,000. So it really helped us this year. And I gotta be honest with you, I've been on this department for 28 years. I was here before the ambulance. I responded to medical calls, had to wait for that ambulance to come up from the city. I worked in private EMS and it's not pretty. They don't make money unless the wheels are moving. Here, you guys are paying for it in some aspects, but in other aspects, it's benefiting you immensely. It's giving you a world-class fighter. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Anyone else have a comment or a question? Oh, okay, Glenn.
Glenn Sullivan, 92 Richards Ave. Chief, the one question I have is, I know we have 2 ambulances now. And I understand we're dipping into the fund to replace those ambulances by doing this. I also know that last week there was a post that I saw on social media where both ambulances were out. What happens when one goes down and we don't have the money to replace it? My only concern, and this is based on your response, is if we take $100,000, are we putting ourselves at the liability of only having one and having to use that mutual aid more often, or potentially putting us in a situation where we now need to go for a capital exemption, not exemption, what that called? It's not an override, but a debt exclusion in order to replace an ambulance, which I know is a much shorter term debt, but I just don't want to steal from Peter to pay Paul. I get what we're trying to do. I just want to make sure that we're being safe about it. Thank you.
Great question, Glenn. We are kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. Without a doubt. And yes, we have 2 ambulances. Like I said, there's a primary one and a secondary one. And the ambulances have a tendency to break down quite a bit because they're always moving. And we do run that risk. We do have options though. The town of Rutland has 3. One which is a complete mechanical spare. We can borrow it from time to time if need be. Right now, we're actually down to one. Our older truck had AC problems, so it's down at the dealership in North Attleboro getting that fixed. So we're hoping that that's going to be a temporary solution, and we may have to give a call here or there to mutual aid. But the quicker we get it back, the quicker we're in a better spot. As far as going for a debt exclusion or replace one, I'm not sure just yet. The oldest truck was purchased off a grant, funded 50% of that. So, you know, we can always put in for an AFG grant and hopefully get something at some point. But right now, and I think the voters spoke, and I think we worry about this year and get through it. So.
Okay, anybody else have a question or comment about this motion to amend the motion under Article 5? That's cool. Okay, ready to vote this report? Sorry.
It's not about. I have a question.
All right, well, let's deal with this motion first. Okay. Is it a point of order? Okay. All right, so this requires a simple majority. We're voting to amend the pending motion. This is not the adoption of the budget yet. This is a motion to change that motion as been read. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. Okay, I rule that the motion to amend has been passed. Now we are going to take up and open for discussion the amended motion on the floor. And is there any further discussion on the motion as amended? No. The numbers, the last number, All right, I'm gonna read the whole motion. How's that? Okay, this is the motion we're gonna vote on now. The motion is that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $6,479,735 and to further appropriate from the ambulance receipts reserved for appropriations account the sum of $500,000 and to further appropriate from the available free cash the sum of $509,481 for a total appropriation of $7,489,216, and that these sums be expended to defray the necessary and usual expenses of the several departments of the town for the fiscal year beginning on July 1, 2024, and especially for any and all items shown in the budget attached to the warrant for Article 5 with the following amendments. Increase line 1220 Fire Department to $1,145,429. Decrease line 1910 Employee Benefits to $834,627. That's the motion we're going to vote on. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye. All those opposed say no. Okay, all right. Who has something they want to say?
Deirdre Malone, 10 Lincoln Circle. I just had a question for Finance Committee that I think she asked before, but it wasn't clarified. On the reserve fund on FY24, how much of that $40,000 was actually used?
I can.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So our year-to-date report that the town accountant handily puts on the website, this is dated 6/24. The reserve fund balance, the reserve fund ending balance is $25,930. So we've expended $14,069 for FY24. Sure. So this year we have expended, sorry, I looked in the wrong spot. Let me try that again. Current budget, ending balance. Yeah. $14,069.
So that's right, Lisa, right? Okay.
Okay. Any further discussions or questions? Yes, ma'am.
Use 25. No, we had 25. That's the back one. 25. Yes. Do you want me to just answer your question before you?
I want to make a motion to reduce it.
Okay, do you want me to answer your question first? And then you can determine if you want to make the motion?
Yes. Okay, awesome. So just to clarify, so I know everyone's like, hey, that number looks out of whack. What's going on? So here's what happens. The reserve fund is the town's emergency. Something awry happened or some expenditure came up that we didn't previously budget for. So when that happens, the town departments go to the reserve fund, which is through Finance Committee. They can access it all year long and they can say, listen, something happened, right? We had a mower and it broke and we can't do anything without replacing these parts and they cost more than what we have budgeted. Or something else came up and we have to fix it. This year, an example was our very long-standing server was completely inoperable. We couldn't do anything without refurbishing it to be able to move forward, to save all the files of the town for the years, keep operating, and that was approximately 8,000, give or take. It was under 10,000. So that's something we didn't have budgeted for in our budget. We didn't anticipate the server going down. We didn't know that was going to happen. So we went to the reserve fund through FinCom and said, we need some assistance with this. The reason the reserve fund is so important, especially with our really tight budgets for both this current year, even though we didn't use all of it, as well as next year's, when you're doing really tight budgets, you're not leaving any room for something that happened that you didn't plan. So keeping that reserve fund at a higher number is important because it allows the town a little bit of a safety net, not much by any means, but a little bit of a safety net on some things to be able to go back to the reserve fund and to the finance committee and say, hey, here's what came up, here's what happened, we didn't expect this to happen, or it's emergent, and we need some help with this, can you help us with the reserve fund? Absent that, going outside of the town's bottom line budget would require the department to come back to town meeting or a special town meeting for approval for those expenditures.
Jen DeCenzo, 42 West. My question, I don't know who can answer it, is about the library funds. So fiscal year 23, it looks like 198,583. My copy's really blurry. And we're gonna reduce that down to 194,092. I'm just curious what that changes for the library.
Chris, do you wanna? Chris wants to speak to that.
Okay.
He's coming.
Come on down.
Christopher Sperduli, 11 Briarcliff. I'm also the chairman of the library board. With the reduction, what's going to happen is the library director is going to be going to try to get a waiver for our CW Mars license and a portion, library accreditation, which is through CW Mars. So it's CMBLC, Massachusetts Board of Library. Yep. So we're going to have to try to get that license through through our reserve, hopefully, with that money.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just to add a little bit more, so making sure we're answering the question asked. So in FY 24's budget was 190. Usually it goes up, and it hasn't gone up huge over the years. It's usually pretty consistent. But in order to continue with making sure that we're getting the library certified, as well as making sure we're still eligible for state grants, it has to go up by a certain amount. And it has to be really consistent with other departments. When you start reducing it, and if you reduce it more than what other departments have been reduced, then what ends up happening is the further you go down below the number you need, and the number we need is in the FY 25 proposed, or the other article 2's budget, which I think is like 204. Anything lower than that number requires us to go to the state and ask for a waiver in order to continue providing the same, to continue getting certification. If they say no, and they have the right to, that actually restricts all of the residents in the community from being able to go to other libraries, utilize online books, be able to access the Boston Library, book shares, all of those pieces. It restricts everything. So the difference, essentially, what was reduced, they took out a lot of the maintenance for the building and a lot of things that weren't absolutely essential to be able to have. I'm looking at my library director who's shaking her head. They did some reductions of some things that there are potentially other funds for, but what ends up happening at the end of the day, it still puts the library certification in jeopardy.
All right. Let's give someone else a turn. Anybody else, please?
This moderation is permission to speak is on the. Need permission to speak is on the.
Okay. Hi, thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Pam Shenneberg. I'm the library director. Good to see all of you tonight. Just to answer Jen's question, specifically, we have to take all of the maintenance out of the budget, and we could use the Richards Memorial Library Trust Fund for that. That's the only thing it can be used for. I also reduced the book budget down to 33,000, which I still can apply for a waiver. If I also had to reduce hours, I wouldn't be able to even apply for a waiver. If we lose certification, it's up to the MBLC. They decide. I have to fill out some reports, and they decide in the fall, and we'll know for January 1st. You could lose all your interlibrary loan privileges. You wouldn't be able to use any other library in the entire state of Massachusetts. The other things I took out were supplies. There'll be no more printing at the library. I won't have money for ink. I know somebody donated me some ink to the library. Thank you. And I was able to buy paper, but when that runs out, there'll be no more printing. I'm sorry. And so certification comes from the MBLC, and you have to have your budget at the average of the last 3 years times 2.5%. On average, the library has increased less than 1.3% over the past 20 years. Since 2009, our budget has increased $35,000. That's $1,875 or so. Sorry, I thought I memorized it per year. It's not a lot, but that is what you lose if we have no certification. I will apply for it. There's no guarantee one way or the other. It's up to the Mass Board of Library Commissioners. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments? So we're dealing now with the amended motion under Article 5. Way in the back, yes, sir.
Not from 26 Silver Street. But I just want clarification. If we vote yay or nay on this right now, this is the budget. It doesn't go out to town vote, like to a ballot, correct? Okay. Why not?
The answer to that question is yes. If we vote on, if this motion passes, that's our town budget without further action by the town.
My only question to that is why wouldn't we just put it out to a ballot like everything else? So, because I mean, there's say 100 people here. That's, I mean, we have what, 5,500 people in the town that should be able to vote on it. I think, I mean,
They are, they didn't show up tonight. These people did, that's how it works. That's the town meeting serves the legal legislating authority for a town. They're the ones that set the budget. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, anybody else have a question or a comment? I think you've been called a new enough times. Yes, sir, over here.
R232 West Street. This question is for the police chief. I've heard things on social media regarding what the impact of cutting our police budget by almost 25% will be. But would you be able to just clarify exactly with this almost 25% reduction, what we are going to be losing?
Chief, could you answer that question?
Mark Sylvester, police chief. I'm not gonna have any good news here to pass on. Currently, 91.5% of my budget is personnel. I had to cut 343,000 from a 1.2 million 96,000 budget. If I wiped out everything in my supplies and purchase services, which is what we use to operate, which I can't do because I'm under contracts, that only gives me $110,000. So the only place I can cut is personnel. I have 2 unfilled spots presently on the police department. And I'm gonna have to cut 2 other full-time officers. With those cuts, I need 3 people to run a 11 to 7 shift on a 4 and 2 schedule. I cannot run it with seven people. The town will have 7 full-time officers. Now, I've been working for the town for 28 years. When I started here in 1997, we had 8 full-timers and 7 part-timers. Currently, we have 10 full-timers. A level of 7 full-timers in the town of Paxton is unheard of. We're going back to the early 90s of staffing. I will not be able to staff a night shift. That isn't even enough. I still have to cut more money. So those 2 bodies plus my positions that I haven't filled is not enough money to make up my deficit. So I have to cut into overtime. I have to cut into supplies. I have to cut into gas. My overtime is cut in half. So I can't backfill shifts. This is not news I want to pass on to anyone in the year 2024. But there is nowhere else I can cut money. It's all personnel. Now, the town contracted with the Anna Maria College. The Anna Maria College pays for 5 officers. Fully. They will be on at night. However, they are policing the college. And they can't leave the college unstaffed because the town entered into a contract. So I am in a catch-22 where there is no win for the police department. We cannot police proactively. We will be sitting in the station waiting for calls to come in. We can't patrol. We don't have the gas money. It's unreal to be talking like this to you. And believe me, I wish I had an answer for you, but it's all of our pay is in salaries. And I hate to cut the offices because if you don't know, it's almost impossible to get police officers today. That's why we still have 2 open. And I hate to lose the ones I have because once they're gone, they're gone. They're not coming back. So, I wish I had good news. I wish I had a solution, but there is nothing I can do with that type of budget cut other than reduce service.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions or comments on the amended motion under Article 5? There's no someone back here. Yes, ma'am, come right.
Solly 14 Burton Mar. A little while ago, we spent a lot of time talking about mutual aid for EMS and fire and what that would look like if we were to have to rely on, private ambulances from the city, waiting for an ambulance to come from the city. Chief, can you just explain what it would look like not having any police personnel on the 11 to 7 shift in Paxton and relying on who? I would imagine that's the state police. And what kind of wait times we would be looking for or looking at if somebody were breaking into our home, if there was some riffraff going on, or you had a Friday night and Anna Maria College is really busy and we only have 2 officers working Anna Maria and the town needs the police. So what does that look like in terms of mutual aid for us if there's no officers 11 to 7?
I'm going to take this just one step further. Not only 11 to 7, but when officers call in sick, I can't backfill those spots. I have no money in overtime. For contractual obligations, the money I have will cover holiday pay, maybe. So when we do not have an officer on, we're going to have to rely on calling mutual aid, like Lauren said, to the state police, who's out of the Brookfield barracks. It may look like there's a lot of state troopers out there, but there really isn't. And I believe they run two, maybe 3 troopers out of that barracks. That's problem 1, because response time is going to take longer. The second is that people think mutual aid, well, we'll just call our surrounding towns and they'll come do our calls. That's not mutual aid. Mutual aid would be as if I'm on a call and I need assistance, I call a surrounding town and they come in. They will not give up their offices to take our calls because we can't fund our police department. It will put a strain on our relationships with our surrounding towns, and their taxpayers would not be happy paying for their offices to come to our towns. Now, I talked to 3 police chiefs today. They offered their, sorrow for this, but made it clear that they will assist whenever they can to our officers on duty, but they cannot give up their services to police our town. So I hope that answers your question, Ron.
Okay, any other questions or discussion on the amended motion under Article 5? Yes, sir.
Ferguson, 38 Brigham Road. My question is there any way to go back to the first vote? Because there was no discussion. It went by very fast. There was a lot of legal, terminology I didn't understand. I don't know if everybody did. And now that we're starting to hear about the consequences of not overriding the town vote, it's sounding quite dire. And are we now stuck
with these reduced services. I know our taxes are high. We should have, somehow thought of that years and years ago, how we were going to get more revenue into the town. But so the question is, is there a procedural way to go back and, table this motion and go back and revote, or at least have some more discussion about the consequences of cutting the budget so drastically?
Okay, anybody else have a comment or a question under this amended motion? So I'm sorry, is there somebody that can address the question? Is there a way to go back? The answer is no. Okay. Sorry, sir. Yes, way in the back. Point of order, what's your point of order, sir? All right, if someone makes a motion to reconsider, we'll consider it. Yes, ma'am. Please come forward. All right, sure. Please don't speak unless I call on her, okay? All right, this citizen's going to speak and then I'll open the floor again. Go ahead, please.
Sarah Ford, 299 Richards Ave, just a comment. Your chance to not have these cuts happen was the election that we just had on Monday. There were 28.6% of the town showed up eligible voters. 26.8% of eligible voters showed up to decide this for the entire town on Monday. I was there all day. I'm your election clerk. Hello. We made that decision together that we want these cuts instead of the taxes. So if you're now just finding out what these cuts mean, welcome to the crash course of small town budgeting.
Okay, anybody else want to be called on? Where? Yes, sir.
Hi, Justin Newton, 46 Davis Hill Road. Could someone just lay out for us what the consequences or the different contingencies would be before we vote on this article, if this article were to fail, as far as our town's budget?
Is your question what happens if it passes and or it doesn't pass?
If we do not.
Okay, who could speak to that? Ms. Pinjatora. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So we are on June 27th. We have voted Article 1. Article 1 rescinded the prior vote we did at the annual town meeting that was contingent on that first override. At this point, we're required to have a budget for July 1st, or the town employees, unfortunately, aren't employed on July 1, with the exception of the school, which we already voted, and the water department. So in order to continue having government on July 1st, we need to vote a budget. The override on Monday failed, and that would have been related to the Article 2 you had before you tonight. Because that failed, we're out of that. So at this point, we have to use what we have for available funds to be able to cover what services town meeting decides we'll move forward with for July 1st.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Moderator, Sandra Fields, Manigan Lane. Can you clarify, Heather, for me, please, the question with respect to the reserve fund? So, I'm sorry, so the figure was 25,000 for this fiscal year was remaining or was used?
That's what's spent, 14,000.
14,000 was spent, leaving 25,000 and change remaining. So 25,000 plus the requested 50,000, right? For the new year, do they commingle? It's zero now. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. May I ask another? Okay, well, I want to make a motion. So, Pam, I'm sorry to point to you. So is the 206 the figure that's required in order for accreditation to be guaranteed, what was in, Article 2? Yeah. I wanted to request to move money from the reserve fund in order to go to the library fund so that the accreditation would not be in jeopardy. I'm getting
206409.
203.
Do you want to just go with the your original proposal? You're going with an in-between number?
No, so motion to move. And I apologize, there's math involved, guys. So motion to move enough money from the reserve fund in order to get the library to 203,383 and 38 cents.
Yeah, 1 second.
Sorry.
Take a moment here to get the motion properly worded so that we can all get the voting. It will just give some inputs.
My apologies.
I think you all understand that when it's in the budget, when you take money from some place, it's going to affect other lines in the budget, so we have to figure out how that's going to happen.
Oh, come on. Hold on, I'm working on it. Oh, come on. 203. I have 383.38. 929,140, is that what you're saying? I did the 206. Yeah, but that's not the motion she made. She made 203. Yeah, well, unless you want pennies.
9,292. If you take the 203 minus the 194, they need an next digit.
The first flash.
The library. I think then you need 9,292.
So 4708. Yeah.
So make a motion to.
Okay, here's the two numbers. Take it.
All right, hold on a minute. I'm sorry, everybody. Steps like this.
So write these three numbers down. So just say library. 203,383. 40,083 and 38 cents. And 38 cents. Yeah, now right, reserve. Now right for library rate increase now under, yeah. 40,708.
That was increased to.
Yeah, 708 and 60 cents. And Lori, do you have a copy of that motion from earlier with the fire? Which one? The one that the fire made, and so. Yeah. So what I would do is I would amend the motion to read that, Mr. Honorary, if you're okay, and then we'll just break this down below and to amend it further.
But no, that maybe back after though.
Okay, is that okay? Yeah. Are you okay with her to read this? So she just reads the whole. Okay.
Okay. Right. Additional amendment? Is it just an
You can
additional,
ask Mr. Moderator.
additional proposal?
Modify further.
Okay, so I move to amend Article 5 to increase the library's budget to $203,383.38 and decrease reserves to $40,708.60.
Thank you.
Thank you.
62.
Hold on, just what are the numbers again? I can't even come up. What should the numbers be? 62 cents, okay. So let me read the motion so we understand. We're waiting for a second. The motion is to amend Article 5 as amended to increase the library's budget to $203,393.38. 380, okay, I'm sorry, my bad. To increase the library's budget to $203,383.38, thank you, and to decrease reserves to $40,708.62. I got that right? Okay, that's the motion. Is there a second on the motion? Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. The floor is now open for discussion on the motion to amend. Mr. Bogren.
Peter Blomgren, 5 Burton Mars Circle. I know for a fact that there are people here who spoke behind my back, who thought that I was going to come up here and propose closing the library. Now, I want to make one thing clear. When I ran to be a select board member, I ran on public safety first. I believe the primary mission of town government is to protect its citizens, police, fire, DPW, EMTs, I'm including with the fire, and our senior center. That's the core role of our government. I decided not to come up here and speak until this, because we have elected and appointed these people to do a job. I do not agree with it. I absolutely do not agree with it. I absolutely would have started with fire, police, DPW, and the senior center. But now we're going to dip into a reserve fund that we need in case of emergency in an unusually tight year, so that we can fund our library. And the motion comes moments after hearing the police chief tell us that there will not be patrol cars on the road because we don't have the gasoline. Our police will not be on duty overnight because we do not have the people to do so. When we live in a safe town because those people are on the streets and are visible and are available overnight. So personally, I think that's where we should have started. These folks who work awfully hard decided different. They decided that we still needed certain other things that, again, that's their decision. Please think through this through. A library's nice. And I said this at one of the information meetings. A library's nice. I can get books elsewhere. I cannot protect myself without police coverage. Oh, I can protect my home. I'm licensed to carry. But I can't stop the speeder who's driving by Asta Bumskit and then the public safety complex before he gets to my grandson at the center of town. And make no mistake, those cops sitting there keep people in check. We all know it, because all of us are guilty. Most of us, I'll be kind, most of us are guilty. When we think we can get away with it, we do. As a selectman, one of the most common complaints I heard, people are driving too fast on my street. Marshall Street, Sumi Street, Brigham Road, not just Pleasant Street, small side streets. So if you want to go with Article 5 as amended by Mr. Benoit, which again addresses public safety, I commend you, sir. Fine. But if we're going to start moving money around for something that isn't going to be one of the core roles of government, I ask that you think twice before voting that way. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other discussion on the motion to amend by changing the library budget? Yes, ma'am. Right up, yeah, please.
I really hate public speaking, so I might have a panic attack. Um, but I just wanted to make a few points about if we're talking about the library right now. Sorry, Joanna McGugan, 8 Camelot Drive. So I wanted to say that if you're thinking about the library as just a nice place or a place for books, it's so much more than that. And in terms of public safety, it is a key partner in public safety because it gives mostly teens, let's say, but all ages, seniors included, a safe place to be and to engage with their community, and it keeps them out of trouble. So it does reduce the burden on the police departments in that way, as it is in the terms of a community partnership. So I just want to point that out. I just want to keep that in mind, since I know public safety is on the forefront of everybody's minds, and mine as well. These cuts, I think, are awful, and I hate that we're in this place. But I do ask that you maybe think bigger. The library is more than just a place to get books. It's a safe place. It helps people. It helps job seekers with their materials. You know, families that don't have a computer. My family does not have a functional printer. We rely on it for that. So it's more the services the library provides are bigger. But that's all really. It's bigger. Oh, okay, man. It's bigger than just a place to get books. So please think bigger if you can. Thank you.
of $509,481 for a total appropriation of $7,489,216. And that these sums be expended to defray the necessary and usual expenses of the several departments of the town for the fiscal year beginning on July 1st, 2024. And especially for any and all items shown in the budget attached to the warrant for Article 5 with the following amendments. Increase line 1 to $1,140,429. Decrease line 1910 employee benefits to $834,627. That's the motion we're voting on, requires a simple majority. All those in favor, please signify by saying. That should be made a second of the voting. Thanks. Now, go slow, I think. Okay, that's the motion we're voting on now, requires a simple majority. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. I declare the motion is passed. That completes the business of this meeting. Thank you for coming. Have a nice summer. We need a motion to resolve, please.
Yes.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're looking for the vote. Thanks for coming.